Most of my work deals with time, but it deals with time in a way that where the time is contained. So static, one of the things that computers do is they turn everything into an object. A photograph is an object, a movie is an object, even things that move and are represented by time are objects. So it's kind of a way of thinking about time as an object also, and all of the works really do that. The trigger was exactly that. All of the memory works have the same conceptual structure to them. They have this electronic box that contains a memory, and then a connection between the box to a representation of that hidden memory. And specifically, I was interested in that notion of we have these memories in our head, and they're hidden in there. You can represent them by writing them down, or you can represent them by doing a painting of a memory, or you can jump up and down to describe a memory. There are an infinite number of ways. So they're this meta thing. They're in your head. Electronic memory has that same characteristic. It exists on this level inside a chip, inside an integrated circuit, and you can't see it. So it needs to be brought out to be presented, and it can be presented in a number of different ways, just like the memory in our head. So it's a very simple analogy, but at the time anyway, I thought it was an interesting one. I tend to work with very simple objects. I've sometimes tried many different objects for works like these, and I tend to hone in on the simplest. Secondarily, because the works are really focusing on memory, I thought probably, I'm just guessing now because I actually don't remember, it was 15 years ago, I probably thought that by using older objects, then they kind of force people to look at the works in regard to memory and how you remember things. All of the works in the memory works, I did not want any of them to be a literal translation. For example, the work about my father, it's a photograph of him, but it's my heartbeat that is modulating his image. So there's a distinction between the memory and the representation of that memory. Specifically, in terms of the measurements, I was interested in using measuring techniques that did not involve photography or a microphone, because I think we have these very overly cliched notions of what memories are, that they're like a picture or they're like a sound. But I think memories are much more complex than that, and I think that's getting lost, partially because we make the analogies between computer memory and human memory. But I think we remember a lot more and a lot more subtle things than just an image or a sound. So none of the memories that I have here are images or sounds. The presentations are, but the memories themselves aren't. The Illuminated Averages, the ones that collapse time, they were experimenting, okay, if I collapse the film Psycho, will it feel like the film Psycho? And then if it doesn't, if I cheat and I tell people what it is, that it is the film Psycho, is that enough? So then you feel that it's the film. Citizen Kane was needless to say, I took film classes, and that's the classic film. So I wanted to capture one sequence from that, in this case, the breakfast table sequence, and present that and see if that sequence was felt, particularly if you know it. If you already know it and you see it, do you feel it? So they always have some personal connection to me. I started using LEDs in, I think, 1999 was the first time I made a work with LEDs, and the thought was that using LEDs I could build my own display devices. So in other words, I wasn't just creating my own images, but I was creating the device also to present the images on. And in another way of looking at it, at the time I was very interested in what can I present in low resolution with LEDs that can have meaning, or would anything have meaning? So they started out as experiments using low resolution. I was interested in getting rid of resolution in imagery and presenting a moving image and wondering what's left in that moving image. If there's something that can be perceived that has a poetic presence. We see movement in a very primal way. It's more primal than details or hair color, or movement is really taken in differently. So these works, many of them, get rid of everything except for the movement. So I believe they can be experienced in a more primal, primitive, emotional, intuitive way than trying to kind of understand them. You just feel them. There's also a technical reason why I chose moving, people moving, is because again, it goes back to how we see, and the primalness of a body moving can be recognized in an extremely simple form. Many subjects that I might choose for those works, I might want to choose them, but I can't because they're too complicated. And at that resolution, you can't understand them or see them. I started escaping from doing two-dimensional work, probably because I'd done it for such a long time, and also it's really all I knew how to do. So it was a combination of exploring, but also challenging myself. I see the camera-based works, digital watch and frames of reference, as interactive works, because your image is brought into the work and represented to you. I see them as, in a way, I've called them before, psychological mirrors. They're mirrors that distort the image and then represent it to you. Specifically with digital watch, I was interested in creating a mirror where you don't have control of your body when you stand in front of this mirror. You move and your reflection moves differently, so you can't, it kind of interrupts your biological feedback system. Frames of reference was maybe another way of looking at that. It kind of looks at a physics concept, the notion of you have one frame of reference and another frame of reference, and they're moving differently relative to each other. And we're not always aware of that because we really only normally see our own frame of reference. So it's kind of a way of pulling you outside of your body and making you aware of other frames of reference. I wouldn't call, it's just my preference, I wouldn't call the LED works interactive because they're on the wall and they're static.